you so much again for being here with us. I will say that Marc was one of our plenary speakers during our AFT Teach Professional Development Conference last summer, and he was absolutely incredible, had people on their feet, and we're so excited to have you. So Marc, thank you for spending your time with us this afternoon.
Thank you, Kelly. I just want to check my sound. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, awesome. So let me start by saying hello, everyone. I'm super excited to be here with all of you today, and thank you, AFT and team, for inviting me to do this webinar. As many of you know, our center at Yale, the Center for Emotional Intelligence, our vision is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society, world, education system. And I'm just delighted to have the opportunity to all of you today and to bring you a journey to help you develop strategies to manage emotions more effectively during these difficult times. So just to let you know, if you are interested in social media, you heard from Kelly, the hashtag SMLPD, and then my Twitter handle is there, and the hashtag that I use is called Permission to Feel. And on Instagram, it's Marc.Brackett, and my website is there as well. So can we just jump to slide 10? Okay, I just wanted to start off by giving you some resources so that, at the end of this session, you don't have to, if you drop off or something, don't hear where to go. The first is just my website, which is marc.brackett.com. Welcome you to join our, which is a free blog that comes out bi-weekly that gives tips and strategies about the science and practice of social and emotional learning and emotional intelligence. I'm actually starting a virtual book club this year. People have been reading my book. As you can see, it's called Permission to Feel. And so people want to be in conversation and ask questions, and we're going to do something fun starting in about 2 weeks. And then there are free articles. We have written a lot over the last couple of weeks around COVID-19 and supports for teachers, for families, for just the general population. So please check that out. And then Ruler is our center's approach to social and emotional learning, and I encourage you to check out our website, which is rulerapproach.org. And then people email me through my assistant, Michelle, and there's her information as well. So on that note, we're going to jump right in. My first question to all of you is, if you know me well, how are you feeling? Many of you may know this tool that we've developed called the Mood Meter. And for those of you who don't know it, I'm just going to give you a quick lesson. So on the x-axis, it says the word pleasantness. Think about that. Right now, on the East Coast, it's around 3:10 p.m. How are you feeling? Are you feeling very pleasant or unpleasant? Think about what's going on in your brain right now. Do you feel like approaching this webinar, or are you kind of feeling distracted or a little down? Think about your energy right now. Do you have high energy or do you have low energy? Do you feel activated? Do you feel deactivated? And then what we do is we cross those two axes to create our mood meter. We've got the yellow, the red, the blue, and the green. So yellow, high energy and pleasant. Happy, excited, elated, ecstatic, optimistic, hopeful. The green, pleasant but lower in energy, calm, content, tranquil, peaceful, relaxed. And then we've got blue and red. The blue, down, disappointed, hopeless, despair. The red, angry, anxious, overwhelmed, panic, uneasy. Please take a moment and ask yourself, what color are you in today? And Kelly, let's put our poll up so we can actually get people's real responses.
All right, I launched the poll, and Marc, I don't know if you're following the chat, was very busy, but a lot of people were saying earlier, very overwhelmed, very stressed, very low energy. Now we're starting to see responses in the chat box, lots of greens, light greens, red.
Okay, thank you.
Yellow. and I'll push the results.
Okay. So this is a little weird. It says red but a blue line. Is that just but the color doesn't really matter there. It's the
Yeah, that's tricky. Yeah, the color does not match the result.
The color does not match the feeling. The color matches the quadrant. So we've got a lot of people in the green. Oops. Sorry, can you go back? So we've got a lot of people in the green, meaning that means they're calm, 45%, but 23% feeling high energy, about 23% in that blue, and only about 10% in the red. All right. So before we jump forward, what I'm going to ask you now is to take about 30 seconds and think about the emotion management strategy that's going to best support you during this webinar. Because I'm asking you to stay engaged for a whole hour. And I don't know about you, but I'm like webinared out, zoomed out. So my attentional capacity is like, I'm in charge right now, so it's going to be easier. But for you at home, what's your strategy? Take 30 seconds, just type in some strategies. And Kelly, as you hear these strategies, I want to hear what people are going to do to maintain their curiosity and engagement, no matter how they're feeling.
Sounds great. Yes, zoomed out. I thought I was the only one. Amen, amen, amen.
So are we getting any strategies?
Take notes. Breathe. Room a lot. Oh my gosh, it's moving so fast. It's hard to read. A lot of breathing. A lot of writing notes. Some watching TV. Some. Oh my gosh.
Watching TV during my talk.
Gardening. I'm a big gardener. I appreciate that.
Wait a minute. You can't go gardening while I'm doing this presentation. Okay. So it's interesting, right? Breathing, taking notes, television watching. That's double dipping, by the way. There's research to show that you will not process this presentation as well as you could have. But I think this is a big part of my webinar today is what are the strategies that we are going to use to help us manage our emotions effectively in life, but also during these unprecedented times. I want to jump to the next slide, which basically, we went ahead. Can you go back to 12, please? The slide 12 is a study that our center ran a couple of years ago, which showed that the top emotions that our educators are feeling was frustrated, overwhelmed, and stressed. About 70% of the feelings that teachers wrote when we asked them, how do you feel, were in that category. I'm sure some of you can relate to that. But 2 weeks ago, our team was able to launch a study with 5,000 educators, primarily across the United States and even the globe. And here's the state of affairs right now. So think about that. We're a nation that is just filled with people who are anxious and feeling stressed and worried and uncertain and overwhelmed. And you can see there's a little bit of hope, there's a little bit of gratitude in there. But for the most part, 90% of the words that people are using to describe their feeling states are around anxiety. And when we ask teachers what are the reasons for that, you can see here, a lot of people were saying they're afraid of getting sick themselves or a loved one getting ill, having to work from home. One of my favorites was, online school started today. My vision of finally having someone else take care of my kids, even virtually, was smashed to smithereens. This requires 100% of parent involvement, actually 200%, because the girls are on different grades. So, the reality is that many of us are working our jobs. We're trying to parent. One father said to me, Mark, I'm a parent, I'm a teacher, I'm now the cafeteria worker, I'm now the custodian, I'm now the tech coordinator, I'm now the gym teacher, phys ed teacher. Like this person said, I do literally everything. And he was freaking out. And I said, well, maybe you should reframe that a little bit and say to yourself, wow, I'm super talented. He didn't really appreciate that at that moment. We see other things that are causing teachers anxiety, right? A quality education for all students, being home and all cooped up, feeling isolated and lonely, obviously the economy and finances, So there's legitimacy here in terms of why people are anxious. But when you really think about it, if we amalgamate the data, what we find is that we're just spending a lot of time in those red and blue quadrants. And there's a few things that I want to say about that. The first is it's okay, right? We all experience unpleasant emotions in life. And especially when there's a crisis like this, it just makes sense, that we're going to have these feelings. And I think one of the problems is that we've been told, because we're in America, right, you've got to be yellow and positive and happy all the time. And I want to just say from the beginning that we don't ascribe to that way of thinking in our center. Yes, there are times to be happy, and we want to be happier more than we are sad or anxious, but we can't be happy all the time. I mean, I always say to myself, I'm a neurotic professor. Like, I'm never going to be happy. Well, I shouldn't say that, but I'm not going to be happy all the time. It's not even in my genetics. What I want to get at is one of my messages today is, please accept the emotions that you're feeling. Don't judge them. It's okay to have your feelings. And B, let's just figure out ways that we can have greater balance of our kind of unpleasant and pleasant emotions. Oops, we're going to just jump by that as our poll. Can we just jump to the next slide, please? Hey, Kelly, can we just go to 18? 18, the one before this.
All right.
Thank you.
Right now. Yep.
No worries. So when we ask teachers, how are you managing your feelings, the well people did, what we see is that, a lot of people are not using the most helpful strategies. Screaming, consuming too much media, overeating, oversleeping, watching trash TV, overthinking, ruminating, losing your temper. I don't know about you, but being cooped up at home has been a really interesting experience. I am used to, running around our center. I'm used to teaching. I'm used to being on planes and giving presentations, and now I'm home all the time. I'm even I like to cook, but now all of a sudden my family feels like they have the right to give me unsolicited feedback about my cooking, which has led to interesting evenings. So I don't know about you, but the pressure and the stress these days has been, it's been difficult to regulate effectively, but there's a way. And as I said earlier, the vision of our center is to use the power of emotions to create a healthier and more equitable, innovative, and compassionate society. And there are 5 reasons why I think you're here today. None of them have to do with Marc Brackett's opinion. What I want to share with you very briefly is the science of how you feel, how your own children feel, how your students feel, how everyone feels matters. The first is attention. What most people don't know about me is that I was a terrible student. I was a very anxious child. I was a very unhappy, angry child. I had abuse in my childhood. And, I was a child who was afraid to go to school. I was bullied horrifically. And I was a C&D student. And now I'm a professor. So it's clear that, my poor grades and my bad decision making had nothing to do with my intelligence. What it really had to do with was my emotion system. I was having strong, unpleasant feelings, and I had no skills to deal with them. And sadly, the people who were raising me, while they loved me dearly, didn't have the strategies either. So we can't ignore the fact that how we feel is driving our attention right now in the simplest form, and even our performance, at school. Decision making. Think about this. How you feel changes the way you see the world around you. In one study that we did with teachers, we found that how they feel literally influenced the way they evaluated an essay. But when we asked them, do you think that how you feel influences how you evaluate the essay? Almost 90% denied it. They said no. And so that teaches us that how we feel literally changes the way we see the world, but we're not always consciously aware of it. The third is relationship quality. Has anyone here ever worked with someone who's difficult? I don't know. I go to a lot of schools. My hunch is that you've worked with someone who might be a little challenging to be around. Take a moment and think about the person who is really difficult. And how many of you, when you think about that person, say to yourself something like, wow, I'd like to work with that person for the rest of my life? Probably not. So, right, emotions are signals to approach or avoid. People who display a lot of negative emotion tend to be people we want to avoid. This is why it's like with anxiety right now, I think it's important to mention that it's not our experience of anxiety, it's how we manage the anxiety. The fourth is physical and mental health. I think it's clear that our emotion system, when it goes awry and it's not managed well, it leads to physical health problems. With teachers, we found that teachers who work in a school where there's a negative climate, they tend to experience more unpleasant feelings, and in turn, they have fewer intentions. They have greater intentions to leave the teaching profession. They're more burnt out. We even found that their body mass index, an indicator of body fat, was higher in those schools. Finally, performance and creativity. Here's what we say in our center. Emotions are the fuel of creativity, and the skills that we learn to manage our feelings determine whether or not that creativity becomes a reality. So let me ask you something. I just gave you my a full chapter in my book and a whole 3 lectures in my course on emotional intelligence in like 2 minutes. So that information that I provided you, what are your attitudes and beliefs about that? Do you see yourself as an emotion scientist? Someone who accepts all emotions as information? Do you think, are you open and curious about feelings? Do you want to learn about your own feelings and other people's feelings? Do you want to get specific? Like really get to the words and nuance? When you fail at regulating your feelings, what is the story you tell yourself? Is it, this is temporary, next time I'm going to do better? Or is it, I'm hopeless, I'm never going to get skilled? So that's the difference between the emotion scientist and the emotion judge, right? The emotion judge is someone who views emotions as error, sees emotions as permanent, like this anxiety is never going to go away, is critical and closed, clumps them, it's like good or bad, and has a fixed mindset. So like my dad had a fixed mindset. He did not deal with his anger very well. And he would say things like, son, this is who I am. Get used to it and get over it. It's like, okay, well, that will be 20 years of therapy in the making. Now we're going to go to my life's work, which is, learning about feelings and how to regulate them effectively. And so let's define healthy emotion regulation. Emotion management has to do with the thoughts that we use, so how we shift our thinking, and the actions that we engage in on a daily basis that help us to prevent unwanted feelings. So I want to prevent being worried or anxious about a test, reduce my anxiety that I'm having, potentially my anger or my frustration, or even my excitement. I'm so overwhelmed. Maybe it's about initiating a feeling of engagement or curiosity. It might be about holding on to a feeling you're having and just like staying there for the day, maintaining it. Or it might be boosting it, like just generating some excitement. The goal of emotion regulation is to promote our health and well-being, to build relationships, make good decisions, and attain goals. There are many forms of healthy emotion regulation. There's what I do for myself. So for example, do I grab that extra piece of chocolate? That's like a self-control strategy. Or when my family is activating me and saying things, can I control what I really want to say? And say something like, thank you for your feedback. I'll take it into consideration. Instead of like, can you just be grateful for the meal? I think you know what I'm talking about. There's co-regulation. It's like how you work with your child to soothe them and that fun back and forth. There's interpersonal regulation, which has to do with the strategy we use to support people. Like, I know that my son likes to do this, so I'm going to do that in order to create joy. Or I know that when I do this particular thing, it helps him feel less angry. A few things before we get into the strategies. One, not all emotions are created equal. Anxiety can be a tougher one right now to regulate than maybe frustration or disappointment. All the strategies that I'm going to teach you, there's no correct strategy. It's specific to who you are. So this makes it automatically culturally responsive, right? Because they're rooted in your personality. So for example, I like hot power yoga. Some people hate hot power yoga. They like to do cold yoga. Some people like to go running. Some people like aerobics. Some people like to do CrossFit or whatever. It doesn't really matter what the physical activity is, right? It matters that you find the one that works best for you. In addition, our religions, our family backgrounds, our culture all influence these strategies. And then it's interesting, the context. I don't know about you, but like I tend to be much better regulating in the real world than I am at home. And as I said, there's no correct strategy. Unlike 5 + 5 = 10, emotion regulation is about finding what works for you. Right now, as you know from our data, and what I'm going to focus on for the rest of this presentation, is that we are a society that is just filled with chronic anxiety and stress. What that means is that our brains are being activated because mostly our thought patterns around the unpredictability of what's happening in the world, that we have no control over it, and that it feels like it's going to last forever. So a lot of us have that right now, and that in combination with maybe not getting enough sleep, maybe not eating so healthy, maybe not doing our exercise, I think oftentimes our worst selves comes out. Like you see on the news, people spraying people with Lysol, gargling with Clorox, panic buying of toilet paper, saying mean or hurtful things, catastrophic thinking. What's funny is that our brains make up stories when we don't have accurate information. Here's an example. I do a lot of flying. I'm a nervous flyer because just like it freaks me out that I'm 30,000 feet up in the air and then it's raining and the plane is shaking. And for years, I engaged in catastrophic thinking. I would say things like, oh my goodness, this is going to be the end, and this plane's going to do this. And then I learned from my cousin, who is a pilot, that there's never been a crash because of turbulence. And I was like, are you kidding me? And he's like, no, Mark. And it's like, wow. So I've been just making up these stories. Of course, you say to yourself, but there's got to be one, and I'm going to be that one. But that's kind of ridiculous, right? That's what our brains do to us. So the more information we have, or the more accurate information we have, right, the better able we are to manage our feelings as well. So here are the big 7. And we're going to go through all of these today. And we're actually going to do some practices. And I am excited to get to do a virtual training in emotion regulation with you right now. We're going to talk about physiological regulation, dealing with our kind of when we're highly activated. Self-care, healthy relationships, how to manage our thinking, how to manage our life smartly, and how to do meaningful things, and maybe even some forgiveness. First one is going to be about breathing. So I wanted to just share with you a few things. One, there's some misconceptions about mindful breathing, right? Some people think it's a religious practice. No. Every one of us was born breathing, and we will breathe until our dying day. Everyone breathes. There's no it's not religion. The second is that mindful breathing is used to only regulate difficult emotions and prolong positive ones. The goal of our breathing, when we do it mindfully, right, is to cultivate a deeper awareness of all of our experiences. We don't have to have our fingers in a certain way or have our hands in a certain position. We can just breathe normally and observe it. So here's a question. I don't know about you, but like I haven't really taken a deliberate breath today. I've been in meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. I scoffed down my lunch. So I could use a breath right now. How about you? Do you want to do our poll here, Kelly?
Yep, sure thing.
Thank
So the
you.
question is,
Be honest with
how
me.
often do you just pause and breathe? And of course, once you've responded, let us know your thoughts in the chat box or on Twitter. I see a lot of you guys on Twitter. Thank you.
Feels good to just sit and breathe and not talk for a minute. I'm gonna. So let's fill out our survey, and excited to see what people have to say.
And the chat box is engaged. Some people are trying to do some breathing right now. Some people never do it or forget. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and push your results.
All right, let's see. So interesting. Often, about 16%, sometimes 42, rarely 36, never 5%. So these are not bad. One thing you should know is that I'm a little hesitant in believing you, because sometimes we overestimate and we want to look better to the real world than we actually are. But I'll take it for what it is. And here's what we're going to do today. We are going to do this. So can we just go to the next slide? Thank you. I don't know about you, but as I said, I could use 2 minutes of just chill time. So I'm going to ask everyone here not to get distracted and start watching television. No gardening right now. I want you to be here with me, and I want you to give me 2 of your minutes to just be still. So maybe you can check your posture, just get comfortable in your seats. I don't want you to close your eyes maybe right now, but maybe just a little bit. Just breathe naturally. You could even put a gentle smile on your face. And breathe and observe. So there are many, like thousands of mindfulness exercises that have different purposes. The 3 that I'm going to recommend for right now are just the simple breath counting exercise, where you breathe in and out and you count to 1. And then you breathe in and out and you say 2 in your head, in your mind. And then you breathe and say 3. Another helpful exercise is where you focus on an image. So one that I used to use all the time was, I used to talk I taught martial arts for many years, and I would have my students sit and breathe, and I'd say, I want you to imagine the moon's reflection in still water. And they would just sit there and be calm and relaxed and just observe that image of that bright, beautiful moon in that still water to deactivate. Today, we're going to try one that I've used to help me manage my anxiety, particularly the anxiety that I have when it's time to go to bed. I have a difficult time falling asleep because my brain is so active and I tend to ruminate. And when I get into that kind of position or place, I do this exercise. I learned many, many years ago from my mindfulness teacher whose name is Thich Nhat Hanh. So we're going to practice this together for the next 1 minute. I'm going to ask all of you, as you breathe in, to say the word in, and as you breathe out, to say the word out. Let's try it. Say it in your head. In and out. And as we breathe in, we're going to say the word deep, deep. And then the word slow. And then we're going to say the word calm. On the exhale, ease. Everyone just put a gentle smile on your face. Inhale. And exhale and just say the word release. Okay. I'm going to ask you to spend 30 seconds now. How did that make you feel? How did it feel to just take a couple of minutes out of your life schedule to be deliberate about breathing? And Kelly, in a few seconds, maybe you can share what people are saying.
Oops, sorry. I got to take myself off mute. More regulated, calm, focused, calming. I need a nap. Nap time. Rejuvenated, deliberate, peaceful.
Excellent.
Relaxed.
So that's just some of the benefits. And, you start off doing it for a minute, and then you do it for 3 minutes, and 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes, and 15 minutes even. 10 minutes, different times. Don't be stressed out. Make a mistake. Just say it's okay and start over again. If you get distracted, just bring yourself back and start breathing again. The science is very clear. When we breathe, we're moving from this automatic place to a more deliberate way of using our nervous system. So it takes, when we're activated, we have a sympathetic arousal. When we bring our sympathetic nervous system into play, it helps us to deactivate. And by engaging, by moving from kind of just natural metabolic breathing to deliberate breathing, what happens is that we change the area of the brain that's being activated from the kind of brainstem area to the motor cortex. So that means we can help us get rid of that chatter, help us have more kind of focus and presence. What the impact is better immune function, decreased hypertension, greater focus and attention, less anxiety, greater well-being. So please try your mindful breathing. These I'm just going to touch upon briefly. Self-care. First, we know that how we, what we eat, who we are, what we eat. So if you don't drink enough water, you're going to be dehydrated. That's going to cause headaches and fatigue and make you have difficulty concentrating. If you drink too much caffeine and not enough water, that also causes challenges. Too much alcohol, same thing. Try to avoid processed foods, because when we're stressed, think about that. When you're stressed out, cortisol levels change, insulin levels change, and then you crave that salty, sugary, fatty foods. So take your vitamins. Try to avoid getting hangry, meaning throughout the day, have a little snack. A little bit of carb can be really helpful, unless you're doing keto, which is really complicated, so your body's in ketosis. That's, for most of us, probably not what we're doing right now. So for the average diet, a little bit of carb here and there helps you to restore your brain so that you can think clearly and also manage your emotions. When it comes to sleep, I hope you're trying to get those 8 hours. I have to tell you, my goal for this week is to bed an hour earlier and try to get up a little bit later. I've been only getting about 5 hours of sleep, which is why I look the way I do. No, just kidding. Right? Poor sleep equals poor restoration, poor functioning. Right? Try no devices for an hour. Take a warm bath. Stretch a little bit before you go to bed. Try to get calm. Right? We know that inadequate or excessive sleep increases anxious symptoms and fatigue and mood instability and hostility. And when we don't sleep well, when our resources are depleted, right, our cognitive functioning is not there. So this is where it's really interesting, because for years I would even mislabel that I was even having anxiety or frustration. It'd be late at night, I'd be on my computer and I'm like freaking out about whatever, or not freaking out, just like working. And I'd be like, oh, I'm so anxious. And then I realized that I wasn't really anxious. I was just freaking tired. And so my brain was making up a story because I was getting all these symptoms of fatigue and, shaking and, weird thoughts. but it was strictly the fact that I was just needing rest. Exercise. So we know that we have a challenge with obesity in the United States and across the world now. We got to do physical exercise, whatever that means for you. Taking walks, getting in your steps, getting a bicycle. It's up to you. But my point here is that we've got to move. And we've got to do that because research shows that it decreases anxiety and stress. It reduces depression. It increases concentration. In one study, what they did was the following. 2 groups of people were randomly assigned to exercise or not, and then someone came in and kind of try to trigger them. And what we found, or what the researchers found, was that people who had exercised were less activated and had less negative feelings. So get the movement in. Healthy relationships. Every one of us has a basic need to be seen, to be heard, and have our basic needs met. But here's the problem. Research shows in our schools just 50% of teachers say they have strong relationships with students. And only 34% of students say they have strong relationships with their teachers. Thinking about this e-learning, virtual learning, how might that look now? I know from our work in thousands of schools across the nation that people are struggling, right? Keeping kids' attention and focus, kids even knowing where the kids are. And I think what's important to know is that just the mere presence of a caring adult can reduce the effects of stress and helps to reduce negative feelings, whether it's face-to-face, in person, or online. So I'm going to urge all of you to just figure out a way to let the students that you work with and your own children know that you care, because that alone is going to help them deal with this crisis. And I want to also encourage you to move away from just being empathic around the negative things in life. Like, I know that you're feeling this way, and I'm so sorry that you're stressed out, and I'm so sorry that you're feeling sad and lonely. Of course we want to show that empathy. But try to find the positive things that are happening and celebrate those positive things. As a matter of fact, what research shows is that we tend to feel closer to people who embellish those positive things than to the people who help support us when we're feeling unpleasant feelings. So just take a moment and think about that. How often do you engage in positive empathy? The next area we're going to go to is our thought strategies. Many of us have negative self-talk. I'll give you an example. So I'm exercising at home, trying my best. And I woke up the other day, Mark, use your strategies. You're going to be positive today. Don't let the world get to you. So I go downstairs in my TV room, and I'm wearing shorts and t-shirt, and I'm starting to do my crunches. And then 2 seconds in, I'm looking at my legs, and they're like really pale. And I'm like, God, you're so pale. And then I'm looking at my stomach, and I'm like, you're never going to have a flat stomach. That was the first 5 minutes of being awake. And I caught myself, and I'm like, wait a minute, Mark, you promised to think positively today. So it is hard work, but we got to do it. And if you're like me, much of your negative thinking comes from your early childhood. When I was bullied as a kid, I was too fat, then I was too skinny, then my nose was too big, and then I was too feminine, I was too this, I was too that. It's amazing how people can be negative and how other people's negativity becomes absorbed by children, and then that becomes the way they see themselves and the way we see ourselves as adults. So I'm going to ask all of you to monitor your self-talk during these difficult times and try to catch it. And you can't just say to stop think that way. You need better strategies. The first is positive self-talk. It's basically saying encouraging words in your head about yourself and the world around you. One little trick that research shows that it's often helpful to distance yourself. So to not say things like, I can do it, but to say something like, Mark, you can do it. So one of my students years ago called me the feelings master. I used to find it funny, and now I'm like, I really need to be the feelings master. So I tend to be a little catastrophic, like my mommy was, and uh, so Mark, I'm going to lose it. You're losing it. I can't take it anymore. And then I take my breath, and I say something like, Mark, remember, you're the feelings master. You can get through this. And it's like, oh yeah, I am the feelings master. So it's that pause, and it's that shifting, and just saying your name and a positive phrase after. It can be difficult, but you got to try it. Another helpful strategy is called reappraisal. Just looking at the situation through a different lens, putting a new spin on it. So here's one that I've been trying, right? I'm never going to make it being home for so long. It's really hard for me. I can't take it. I don't know. I want to get out of here. I was in my car the other day going to the grocery store. I'm like, don't I have to be somewhere? I'm like, no. I'm like, oh no. Yeah, you're right. There's no place to go. And so then I said, "Is that Mark? This is an opportunity to learn and grow closer to my family." And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. So think about it. That's a reappraisal, because I'm saying I'm not going to be able to stand it. And then I look at it from a different perspective. That's what reappraising is challenging yourself to be creative, to say, how can I see this from a different perspective? So we're going to try it. It's often hard to think of positive strategies for ourselves. It's really hard. So it can be easier to think of strategies for other people. And I know that, many people are struggling, right, with distancing, with staying at home. So here's my question. I want you to think about someone you love deeply who is feeling all cooped up, lonely, and sad. And they're saying, I can't take it anymore. What advice might you give them? And let's go into the chat box. Think about someone you love. They're saying, I can't take it anymore. I'm losing it. I'm going to lose my mind. What would be the advice you would give them? And Kelly, whenever you're ready to share, that would be great.
Yep, here we go. Go for a walk. Get outside. This is temporary. You need a fun distraction. Breathe. Mindful breathing. Pray. You guys are fast. Watch a movie. Do FaceTime. This will pass. The storm will pass. A lot of exercise, a lot of breathing. Call a family member or friend. Spend time with your pet. Do a craft. Gardening.
So you can see here, Kelly, like people are really coming up with a lot of ideas. If I were to ask you to do this for yourself, it'd be like, I can't think of anything. All I can think of is how I can't take it anymore. It's like, but say this, think about it for someone else. A mom came up to me, recently, and she goes, Mark, these strategies really work. She had read the chapter in my book on emotion regulation. She goes, I've tried it at home and it really worked, and her son was complaining about something and he was feeling anxious and overwhelmed. And she goes, but honey, like, I understand, but I know that you're having a hard time, but like, think about if your best friend were having this challenge, what would you tell him? And then the kid came up with all these ideas. I would do this and I would tell him that and I would tell him that. And then his mom, he said to his mom, his mom said to him, I should say, honey, look at all those ideas you came up with. Maybe you could try them for yourself. And the son paused and he said, Mommy, you're a genius. So I promise you, right, you can try these strategies and they work. All right, I'm trying to go to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about managing our lives smartly. I don't know about you, but when I have too much time in my hands, my brain makes up really weird things about the world. So try to have consistency in your wake up time and your meals and your exercise and your schedule and your playtime. The more scheduled you are, the more routines you have, right? The less opportunity there is for you to kind of make up stories about what's going on. So I ask you right now, think about the last 2 weeks. How successful have you been at having a healthy routine? Can you think about ways that you can improve the structure in your life, like the meal times, the making time for exercise, the actual family time where you do things that you enjoy. I'm also going to urge all of you to be a preventionist and not an interventionist. So what do I mean by that? Try to think about the things that make it hard for you and the things that make it easy for you. So I have an aunt who is just lovely, but she calls me all the time and she's like, what's wrong? Are you sure is this ever going to end? And like within 30 seconds, my heart's racing. I'm thinking to myself, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And I realized like I got to limit my exposure to my aunt, right? So try not to surround yourself with people who are going to make you active or anxious. Do surround yourself with people who are calming, right? The first couple of weeks I was on social media all day, checking the news. I was watching CNN. I was watching all these shows. And then my brain was like, every 8 minutes, the news cycle changes. I was going crazy. So don't check social media or watch news all day. You're going to go nuts. But do stay informed. You might even consider your best self each morning. This is a boy in 4th grade, and what I love is that he wrote his best self is kind, hardworking, selfless. Think about that. 4th grader, his best self. He wanted to be seen as a child who was selfless, determined. Take a moment and think about yourself. How do you want to be seen? How do you want to be talked about? How do you want to be experienced? What are the words that you want to use to describe your best self? We want to see them. Kelly, any words coming in? What are the words you want to use?
Peaceful, nurturing, understanding, generous, caring, spiritual, compassionate, thoughtful, hardworking, loving, loved. Also go back and forth to Twitter. I appreciate there's a lot of great comments that are also coming in on Twitter too.
Awesome. So every morning when you wake up, maybe you can set a best self intention. You can say today, right, I'm going to be that kind, loving, compassionate person. And then before you go onto your virtual learning network or whatever you're using to teach, can you say, no matter what today, you're going to respond through that lens of that loving, caring, compassionate person. It will help. Finally, I hope that you're giving yourselves the permission to do things you enjoy. And I want to say that you don't have to have money or a lot of money to do things you enjoy. Sometimes our joy comes from the littlest things in life. And I don't think we give ourselves enough permission to be free. We think, if I go through this and I problem solve all day long about this issue, I'll find the solution. It's another lie that we tell ourselves. Creativity often comes in the downtime. I don't know, when I was writing my book, some of my best ideas came when I was taking a walk or when I was in a yoga class. I'm like, I finally figured it out. So you need to give your brain less pressure. There's an area called the just default mode network back here, that when we're under less pressure and we're relaxed, it helps to spark those creative ideas. So try taking a walk. Try new exercise. I can tell you, a woman who works in a center, she goes, my husband and I, now we try to sing a new song together when we're making the bed in the morning. That sounds like fun. Can you write a gratitude letter to someone who inspired you? Can you just try a new recipe? Watch a new show, listen to a new podcast. I just did a podcast with Brene Brown. You can go listen to that after this. That was a little deeper about my journey and about her work. And it was just so much fun to talk with her. Find fun ways to connect with friends and family, right? Offer to help. So I want to remind you a few things about emotion regulation. The strategies that I taught you today are all developmental. This is why adolescents get a permit before they get a license, right? So make sure that when you're helping yourself or helping kids especially, right? You're thinking like about their cognitive development and their level of readiness for these strategies. Here's the thing, you've got to learn them and practice them. And, I always, it's not a joke, but as someone who had a lot of anxiety and stress in life, I did go for therapy, and I learned a lot about myself and my mom and my relationships, but I really never learned skills and strategies until I went and got those specific strategies, that self-talk strategy, that reappraisal strategy, those breathing exercises. So yes, there's tremendous benefits from insights, but we really need skills. You got to practice them. You're going to fail. Think about what it takes to become a good writer. Think about what it takes to become a singer or any kind of professional, right? You got to practice. So where are we providing the time for ourselves and our kids to practice these strategies so they can get better at them? And we got to ask ourselves, is it working? And if not, what do we need to do differently and how do we refine it? And we need a tool bag, because sometimes, I apologized the other night when I was mean, and my apology wasn't accepted, and I felt terrible about that. And then I needed to go take a walk to find my creativity, to think of another strategy. So you need multiple strategies in life as well. So as we wrap up our time together, I'm going to ask you to do the following. Think about all the strategies we discussed today. Which one resonates with you the most? Do you want to do some more mindful breathing? Do you want to engage in better self-care, positive relationships, cognitive strategies, that self-talk? Do you want better routines? Right now, set a goal. Which strategies can you commit to this week? What are you going to do differently as a result of this webinar? And I want you to really embellish that experience. If I use that strategy, if I do the mindful breathing, if I take that time to have some fun, if I use that positive self-talk, what do you see will be different for you? What will be the benefit? And I also want you to think about what might get in the way. What might be, if you want to have a better routine, what's going to be the excuse that when I come down, when I email you in a week from now, I say, hey, how's that going? And you'll, I said I was going to exercise at 7 a.m., but I didn't get to it because I went to bed too late. So the going to bed too late is what's getting in the way of your ability to get that exercise in. So you have to think about the barriers to your strategy sometimes too. And what I want to end with is that you really owe it to yourself and your loved ones to use healthy strategies, right? We, as the adults who are teaching, who are raising kids, right? We have to be those role models. So let's put it all together. What I'm going to ask all of you to do is the following. 1, give yourself and others the permission to feel all emotions. Remember that emotion regulation is not about not feeling, right? It's about accepting all of our feelings, but using them wisely. Strive to be that emotion scientist. So I was blessed with an uncle in my life, my Uncle Marvin, my mother's brother, who was my hero. He's the reason why I do this work, because he supported me in my childhood. He was that unconditional, loving person who was a listener, not a knower. He didn't tell me to toughen up. He just said, let's talk about this. Let me help you get through this. Remember that physical distance doesn't mean psychological distance. It can be that Uncle Marvin for someone else. Right? Appreciate that developing these skills can be harder than learning other skills. This is hard work, especially in these times of unpredictability. Try to be that role model. And if you fail, which you will, just be open to apologizing. That's very freeing too, to just say, you know what? I really messed up. I'm sorry. And then you can forgive and you can try to repair. And then you take that breath and then you start again. And if you need professional help, it's important. Go for it. And so I want to end by saying, please take this work seriously. What our research shows is that people who have these skills, this ability to manage their emotional lives, they tend to be healthier, they tend to be happier, have greater well-being, they tend to make better decisions, have better quality relationships. And in the end, what my hope is that we can make sure that all children develop these skills so that they can manage life's frustrations and disappointments and the overwhelm and the anxiety, and in turn have their dreams come true. So on that note, I just want to say thank you so much for coming out today. Again, there's my information, and I will end with a quote from Viktor Frankl, one of my heroes, who wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning that many of us read in elementary or middle, high school. Between stimulus and response, there is space. And that space is our power to choose our response. In our response lies our growth and freedom. So may all of you fill that space with these helpful strategies, and may you have just ease in this difficult time, and may you give yourself the permission to have these feelings and try to use these strategies to use your emotions wisely. And on that note, thank you. And I'm going to stop here. And I know we're about 2 minutes over, but maybe we can take 5 minutes of questions. And then, of course, you can just go to our websites to get more information. So back to you, Kelly.
Sure, terrific, and thank you. And there's lots of great comments that are coming in. I also want to say that before I ask the first question, you should be able to download your PD certificate if you're logged into a computer or a desktop. So so long as you've answered the two of the three poll questions that we presented during this webinar. If you missed one, you'll get an email from us an hour after this. We finish our live version. And you'll be able to answer your poll question at that point. And hello to everybody who may be joining us on demand at a later time. I also want to say that the copy of this PowerPoint is also available for download on Share My Lessons. And I want to apologize for some of the spacing errors that was not on Marc's issue. This webinar platform kind of squashed or squished some of the slides. So the thank you actually does in his actual PowerPoint say YOU in the full. Okay. Marc, can you explain the difference between ruler and zones of regulation? How does the ruler approach differ? And I love this webinar, by the way.
Appreciate that. So they're just different approaches. Zones is more tailored to, supporting management of emotions and that, domain. Where with ruler, there's training for leaders and for teachers and for students and for families. There's an actual curriculum, for example, to teach very specific feeling words. And the mood meter looks very similar to the zones tool. But there are other tools that I didn't get into today because I wasn't sharing our whole ruler approach. So just say that ruler is a preschool to high school systemic approach to SEL, and zones is just a very good program.
Great, and we've received a number of questions about, helping students with these things. I advise middle school students or elementary or high school. I have a 4 and a 7-year-old. I would appreciate your advice. But and then somebody also, among those, I'm putting all these together. Somebody also asked, do you think that starting each class, whether virtual or physical, with a minute or two of mindfulness or meditation helps the students as well as teachers get into mindset for learning?
I definitely think that work can be extraordinarily helpful. I would also say that you really want to get more detail, using a tool like the mood meter, which I did in the beginning of my webinar, is helpful to know because, the mindfulness can help us be more present. But sometimes kids need other strategies, right? They need a hug when we were in the real world, or they need, a specific piece of advice, like they need a self-talk strategy, or they just need to get a drink of water or take a walk or be alone, for a minute or two. So the way we like to think about it is when you're working with children, have them pause, give them an opportunity, but also make sure you know what their feeling is and then find out what they need, and then do your best to just support them in finding a strategy that meets that need.
Thanks, Mark. And another question was, how do you stay positive when you have to be around a lot of negativity? This is one that we saw in the chat box. So negativity, whether it's from a family member or a colleague.
So I think what's important there is that we have to not allow other people to have power over our feelings. And I think oftentimes, we lose ourselves in other people. And so it's engaging in that self-talk. It's thinking about your best self. It's listening, but not absorbing. So I'll give you one example. My father, who was a great guy for the most part, he was difficult though. And we would get into a lot of fighting, and we had some challenges. And when he would start really becoming negative, what I would do is I would literally make a screen around him, and I would make his behavior into a movie. And so instead of being like, ugh, in the room with that aggression and that anger, I would distance myself from it and literally observe it as a movie. And it just helped me to not get lost in that feeling. So that's like the 2.0 webinar.
Well, I think we're getting close on time, Mark. So I don't know if there's any kind of closing remarks to do, and then I will finish up with some housekeeping items.
Yeah, let me just wrap up by saying one last thing, which is, oftentimes people say, well, gosh, Mark, you had a lot of trauma in your childhood and you suffered a lot, but you turned out to be just fine. And, well, just fine is a tricky term. But what I want to share with you is that, first, while my parents did not know a lot about regulating emotions, they did get me a therapist as a kid, which helped me with my trauma. 2, I had my Uncle Marvin. 3, I got involved in the martial arts as a teenager and became a competitive expert, in the martial arts. 4th, I got to get a doctorate in psychology and become an expert in these, in these skills. Writing curriculum. So I'm 50 now. My whole life has been dedicated to this, and I still struggle. And then I think about our nation's youth who are in schools, with high poverty and temporary housing, and I think to myself, do I just want to sit here and say, like, I just hope that child, will learn these strategies? I can't do that. So what I want to end with is saying, I believe it is our moral obligation as an education system to help every child learn strategies to help them deal with their feelings, which means that it is our moral obligation as the adults who are raising them and teaching them to be the best possible role models. And on that note, I hope this was helpful, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you again, Mark. You've got a lot of fans in the group chat and within Twitter. I encourage everybody to keep this conversation going. There's so many thoughtful comments within the group chat, and I'm seeing a lot of it on the Twitter world. So if you can, keep these conversations or the questions that you have that you didn't get answered, use Twitter with the hashtag #permission-to-feel, and then also hashtag SMLPD for Share My Lesson PD. And you'll be able to see a lot of the comments that happened during this webinar, and then also keep that conversation going. So again, hashtag #permission-to-feel and hashtag SMLPD. I'm going to close with just a couple of reminders as well. We have a very active page on Share My Lesson. It's a distance learning community. I encourage everybody to join this community. It should be a URL if you're on your computer, should be popping up on your screen. So when you do log in to Share My Lesson, if you don't have an account, you can join fast. And please join this community and join the discussion, because there's a lot of people asking questions and looking for advice. And, it's a good sharing space as we're all trying to navigate this new world that we're in right now as both educators and parents and just workers in general. So again, Mark, thank you so much. I'm going to push one more poll question, one that we've actually already pushed at the beginning, just in case somebody missed the one of the 2 poll questions. So I'm pushing one again. So if you did miss that poll question, I'm throwing one to you right this moment. What will be the first or second thing you do when you can be back out in public? So I've pushed that to you as another opportunity to access that PD certificate. And so, Mark, thank you again. We really, really appreciate you.
It was my pleasure to be with everyone. Have a great afternoon, and I look forward to continuing the conversation.
Yes, thank you, everybody, and thank you, Mark. And at the bottom of your screen, there also is an evaluation survey form. So please let us know give us your feedback, what you thought. It's always really helpful to get that feedback from you because it really improves our offerings with the webinars, and especially even more now, we're going to be continuing to do more of these types of webinars. So if there's a topic that would be very helpful for you, it would be great to get that feedback within the survey. All right. From all of us at the American Federation of Teachers, thank you. We appreciate you. We miss you. And we are rooting for you and all of the challenges that we're going. And I am going to end this and then sit on my chair and have 5 minutes of quiet breathing. So thanks again, and thank you, Mark.